In this video, we're going to briefly explore some of the native modeling tools located in Adaptive Builder, and these might include dynamic dimensioning, reference dimensions when we're moving components or a vertice of a component. It might include grid lines, snap tools, and so on. So we'll just arbitrarily model some components here and explore how some of these tools are used. The first thing we want to do is go to Model, and you'll notice at the bottom, this is the user bar at the middle bottom of the screen. We have snap tools. These are docked at this location. They cannot be moved from this location, so you may be referring to this set of tools quite often in the modeling process. And the reason we would model something natively might be for lack of a CAD file. It might just be a very simple model we're trying to set up, or it might be modifications to an existing model. So what we'll do first is, again, we have snap tools, snap to endpoint, snap to midpoint, and so on. A couple of things to know. We have a snap to grid. This is just a background grid. You can change the settings of the grid. If you have the grid on, the grid snap supersedes snapping to other locations. So this may be useful to turn this off and on when it's needed or when it's appropriate to be used. We're going to go ahead and just turn that off. We also have the ability to model grid lines. So if we use the grid line wizard, you can set up the number of horizontal grid lines, the distance between grids. We might say this is 7 meters, an angle for the grid that is horizontal or vertical, and then the labeling type where we start a sequence of labels. Here we might do 4. We'll do this at 10 meters, and then I'll rotate this by 20 degrees, let's say, and we'll say OK, and we have some set of grids here that the program will produce. If you double click on a grid, it can then be modified in terms of the number, the label of the grid, the shape of the grid, and so on. You can also add additional grids. If we go back to the grid line, we can use user-defined grid lines. So I could just put a grid at really any location and then go in and modify that grid or the properties of that grid. So there's a couple of options there. If I want to copy the grid lines to different levels, for example, if I go to a side view, we can see that these grids are actually modeled at what we call the current plane, and that's more easily represented here. If I go and navigate upward, notice the grids are no longer there. If I navigate downward, the grids are no longer there. So we might want to copy these to different levels. I'll take this and I'll copy this vertically using modify vertical copy, and I'll copy this up one time. And now we have grids at this level, which is called the top plane. That's actually indicated here at the bottom right. That indicates the active plane when we're in single level mode, and also the active plane when we are in multi-level mode. Okay, so there's options there for grid lines. Now if I was to use these grid lines as a reference, I'm going to go ahead and save the file. And we'll go to Model. I'm going to add a column, and we'll add a column. My intent is to add a column at an intersection, so we need to turn on Snap to Intersection to do that. We'll add a couple of columns here, and maybe we want this column to actually be offset from this grid point up 2 meters and over 2 meters. If I grab that column, you can see I actually have dimensions appearing both vertically and horizontally. That's called dynamic dimensioning. If you want to change the increment for the snapping of the dynamic dimensioning, we can go to Home under Settings, Dynamic Dimension Settings, and change the increment or the angle for the dynamic dimension. And there's a few other settings here available to the user. Another option is to take the column, start moving the column, and right click and say Dimension Input. And now I can say I want this to be offset in the X direction by 2 meters and the Y direction, and these follow the positive direction of these global axes. We'll say OK, and that moves the column from that position. I'm going to go ahead and model another column here at this location. And in this case, I want to move it down 2 and over 2. So these are both negative inputs. But I'm going to use reference lines now to align this. So let me show what we're trying to do here. We want to take this column and basically move it to this point. Because I don't have a reference point to just easily snap that column to, I have to create a reference marker or an intersection. Okay, and this obviously is more difficult than doing it this way, but this shows and demonstrates how you might use reference lines in the program. So we'll go to Home. I'll go to the Draw panel and just create a reference line. Now notice that I'm going to actually turn that snap to intersection off, and if I go back to draw the line, it doesn't snap on the column centroid. I need to turn on snap to endpoint to snap on the column centroid. So if we have a column, we're going to create a column here. The endpoint of the column is this point and this point. It's the vertical axis endpoints of a column. If you want to snap on a corner 1, 2, 3, or 4, we have to actually turn on snap to vertices of components in conjunction with snap to endpoint. And then that would allow us to actually snap. If I draw a line, I can now snap to these corners of a component. So using these tools properly will really help in and cause less frustration if that's something that the user experiences when you're trying to draw and align things and even model component to component type of connections. Okay, so let's go back. We're going to draw that construction line. Notice I have my line here, and I'm going to draw a vertical line, but I want it to be perpendicular, so I'll turn on snap orthogonal mode, or rather I should have said orthogonal. We'll snap orthogonal this way and also this way. If I select that line, you'll notice it actually selects the grid line. So if I press tab, it will toggle to the line that I actually want to select. Another way I could do this is just simply turn the grid lines off. I'll go to Visibility, View Settings. This is also down on the bottom. And I can turn off the grid lines here. I'll turn those off. Now I want to copy this down 2 meters. So we'll go to Modify. By coordinates, I'm going to go -2 meters. I'll say copy, and I'll say, in this case, -2 in the X direction, and copy. That creates a reference marker. Now I'll just take this and move it to that point with snap to intersection turned on. And lines have no other consequence in the model other than just being able to reference them for drawing purposes. Let's go ahead and turn the grid lines back on. And we'll go and let's create a wall. So we're going to go to Model, Wall. Okay, and I want to move this point of the wall some distance, or maybe this wall, I want to move this point over in the X direction by, let's say, 2 meters. So another option you have is if you double click on a component and go to Location, you can always change the coordinates of the wall position. So this is point 1, this is the start point and the end point, and for point 1 we're going to move that by 1 meter, or excuse me, by 2 meters, so this will be 15, I'll just call it 15.1, and that realigns the position of the wall. Okay, so I will go ahead and turn the grid lines back off, and we're going to lay out some additional, and I'll delete these lines out of here. Let's go ahead and create a few more columns. So for this column, I'm going to copy that vertically. I'll go to Modify and Copy by coordinates. And we're going to copy that vertically by 7.5 meters, and I'll copy it 3 times. Okay, and then I might take these columns, and I know that those are spaced every 10 meters in the other direction. And so we'll say this is 10 meters, and we copy those 2 times. And then we're going to go ahead and create a slab from this set of vertical supports. Now the slab edge might be the most difficult to create just using native tools. We might say, well, the slab edge, it's aligned with this edge of column, but it needs to come out, let's say, again, 3 meters from here, maybe 3 meters from here. And this is where reference lines really can be helpful. So I'll go ahead and create a reference line here. I'm going to create another reference line there. We'll say the slab edge here is aligned on that. And I'll just take that out and this one out. Okay, and actually we're going to create another reference line vertically from here up. And again, I have snap to vertices of components turned on, snap orthogonal, and then snap to endpoint. And we know that this needs to come out by 3 meters. We'll just copy that. This one we're going to say needs to come out by 3 meters also, and this one. So I'll take this. This is going to be in the negative y direction. We'll copy that. And then we'll say that the slab edge just follows this shape. We want the slab edge to align with the corner, the edge of this wall. And then it will, from this point out, it will be aligned with the edge of this column down to this line here. Okay, so we need a few more reference lines. And I'll grab that and just come back over the top of it. And then from here, I want to go from there out to there and something like that. I don't really need one up here because I already have 2 points I can snap on. We'll go to Model, Slab, and I'll go ahead and turn off Snap Orthogonal. That makes it a little more difficult to move and align the slab, so I'll turn that off, and I still have Snap to Vertices and Snap to Intersection turned on. And you can see I can snap to the face of that wall. I can snap to that intersection. I'll go down to there. And I believe we have something like that. Okay, I'll exit out of it. I don't want to see all these lines, but I might want to keep them there for reference. So to turn those off, what we can do is go to Home under the Layer Settings option. I'll just sort this by alphabetically, and then I can go down to Adapt Line and turn off that layer, and that turns the lines off. Okay, and now we have our model built in a single level. Now if we wanted to replicate this multiple times, there's a couple of ways to do this. I can go to Model and I can modify. I can replicate reference planes. So if I do this, I can say, well, take whatever is located at this reference plane, whether it be slab, columns, walls, loads, support lines, tendons, and copy them vertically. And I'll copy this 6 times. It even copies the grid lines that were already there. So that's another way to copy and get the grid lines in place. And now I have a vertical model based on that one slab that I just created. Let me go ahead and turn the grid lines off. Okay, so we now have a model like so. Another way of doing that would be to use the option for copy and move vertical. And that's really only going to copy what we've selected. So let me turn this on its side. You'll notice I have a top plane, I have a bunch of fill-in planes that the program replicated, and we can always modify those from Model Story Manager. We could rename them. I'm just going to add a couple more planes on top of this. I'll go back to here. And now I want to copy just this stuff vertically. But I'm only going to copy these columns and this slab, because the slab plan will change vertically. I'll copy it one time. So I'll go to Modify Vertical, and I'll copy this up, or 2, and I can set the plane. I'll just copy it up one time. This only copies what's been selected. So now my current plane, my active plane is called current, which is really down here. You can see it's highlighted red there. I want to change my active plane to the top plane, but I want to stay in multi-level view so that I can kind of see what's going on below this level in a plan view. I'll go back to a plan view. Notice that we're in multi-level mode. That's right here. Okay, and I know that, let me go ahead and turn that off. And I'll go back, let me just go back to a side view briefly. I'm actually going to select all of my walls and columns below this level to turn off. So I'll do this. I'll go to Home, select by type, all columns and walls, but I want to deselect these ones. Okay, and then I'll go to Visibility and I'll say Hide Selection. And now I have something that looks like this. Why am I doing that? Because I want to be able to change the area of the slab at that top level, the top plane. Notice I'm still at the current plane in multi-level mode, so I can go to the Story Manager, change this to top plane, say set as active, and now I've changed this to top plane. Okay, so if we select this slab, I'll go back to, now if I'm in top plane, if that's my active level and I'm in multi-story mode and I select a slab, you may say, well, which slab was selected? So it might be helpful actually to go to a 3D view, select it, and then come back to here. And I can right click and delete some of these points. So I'll delete point 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I want to square off this corner of the slab. So to do that, I actually need to add a point back. I'll click that, right click, insert. Okay, I'll escape so I have an extra point and I can move that point. And I can move it if I know the dimensions. I could eyeball it, if you will, by just using my cursor lines to align it. Or I could use, again, the line tools to align that. Now what I have, if we go to Visibility under the Render Model tool, you can see I have something that looks like this. And I have 3 columns here I actually want to delete out of there also. Okay, so let's delete those. I'm still working in multi-level mode. If I go back to default display, it's going to show everything. And we'll go back to the render model. Now we have something that looks like so. And I want to copy this level now up to the remaining 2 or 3 levels that we created for the model. Okay, so I'll go back to a side view and take this. I'm going to copy this 3 times. So I'll select the option for modify, vertical copy. I'll copy this up. Even if I said 100 times, we're not replicating the level, we're copying something 2 levels. So this will only fill in whatever is in place in terms of the vertical structure of the model. And that creates those additional levels. And finally, we end up with something that looks like this. If you have any questions or need any assistance, please don't hesitate to contact us at support@adaptsoft.com. Thank you.